Right now, you are the only kind of human on Earth. Every person you have ever met, everyone in every country, is one species. There is nothing else close to us. No other kind of human anywhere. That feels normal. It is not normal. It is brand new. Go back 50,000 years, and the planet looks completely different. There are at least 4 other kinds of human alive at the same time as you. Possibly more. Some are stockier and far stronger, built for ice. Some live on islands and stand barely a meter tall. One is so poorly known that for years almost everything we had came from a single finger bone. They are not our ancestors. They are our contemporaries. Cousins, alive at the same moment, breathing the same air. And then, one by one, they are gone. And we are the only branch left standing. So what happened to them? The honest answer is not one dramatic event. And it is not that we were simply better. It is slower and stranger than that. Before anything else, 2 warnings. The first is that the word species is doing a lot of work here, and it is not a clean word. The textbook definition says separate species cannot produce fertile offspring together. But we now know several of these groups had children, and those children had children. So when I say 4 kinds of human, I do not mean sealed boxes. I mean populations different enough in body and in DNA that specialists give them separate names. Closer to dialects of one language than to separate languages. The second warning is that this field moves fast. Almost everything in this video was either discovered or completely rewritten in the last 20 years. Some of it will be out of date within a decade. That is not a weakness. That is what a healthy science looks like. And a lot of it rests on very little. Whole populations known from a handful of teeth. Keep that in mind. I will tell you when we are confident and when we are guessing. Start with the one that lasted longest, because it puts everything else in scale. Homo erectus appears around 2 million years ago. Sit with that number, because it is easy to read straight past it. Every city ever built, every war, every empire, every written word, all of recorded history, fits into the last 5,000 years or so. Homo erectus lasted roughly 400 times that long. If their run were a single day, ours would be the last couple of minutes. They were also the first to look properly like us from the neck down. Long legs, shorter arms, narrow hips. A body built for walking and running across open country for hours at a time. Their brains were smaller than ours, but far larger than anything that came before them. And they were almost certainly the first humans to leave Africa. Their fossils turn up in Georgia, in China, in Indonesia. That is the part people underrate. Leaving Africa means walking into climates nothing in your ancestry prepared you for, with no map, and then staying there. They made a distinctive teardrop-shaped stone hand axe. And here's the strange part. That design barely changes for more than 1 million years. It is tempting to read that as a failure of imagination. It is probably the opposite. A tool that works, in a world that is not changing, does not need improving. We are the unusual ones, redesigning everything every few years. And then their world did change. Their last known population lived on the Indonesian island of Java, and recent dating puts them there until somewhere around 110,000 years ago. By then they were cornered. Rising seas had cut the island off. The open woodland they had hunted for 1 million years was thickening into dense rainforest. The animals they knew were vanishing. There was nowhere left to walk to. No catastrophe, no enemy, just a slowly shrinking world, and a population too small and too isolated to adapt one more time. A species that had outlived every climate the planet could throw at it for nearly 2 million years quietly ran out of room. That pattern, small numbers, cut off, world shifting underneath them, is going to come up again. And again, between erectus and us, the family tree gets messy, and it is worth being honest about that. There are fossils in Spain, Germany, England, and across Africa, from between roughly 800,000 and 300,000 years ago, that do not fit neatly anywhere. Some are called Homo antecessor. Many are called Homo heidelbergensis. A number of specialists think that second name has been stretched so far it has stopped meaning much at all. At one Spanish site, a deep shaft called the Pit of Bones, there are remains of at least 28 individuals from around 430,000 years ago, already showing features that point toward Neanderthals. This is the stretch where the branches separate. One line heads toward Neanderthals and Denisovans across Eurasia. Another heads toward us, in Africa. And we are older than most people assume. Fossils from a Moroccan site called Jebel Irhoud have been dated to roughly 300,000 years, and they are usually treated as early members of our own species. Which means that for most of our existence, we were simply one more kind of human among several. Being the only one is not our natural state. It is the last chapter. And this is where the picture most of us were taught falls apart. Human evolution is usually drawn as a line. A hunched ape, then something in between, then a modern man striding off to the right. That image is wrong in the way that matters most. It was never a line. It was a bush. Many branches, growing at the same time, overlapping, and almost all of them ending. We are not standing at the top of a ladder. We are the one twig that has not snapped off yet. Which brings us to the cousins everyone has heard of, and almost everyone has wrong. Neanderthals lived across Europe and Western Asia for well over 200,000 years. For most of the 20th century, they were a punchline. Slouching, grunting, stupid. That was never based on the evidence. One of the first good skeletons found belonged to an individual with severe arthritis, and his hunched posture got generalized onto an entire species. Here is what they were actually like. Short, broad, and immensely strong. Wide ribcage, thick bones, heavy muscle attachments. Built to hold heat in and to generate force. Large noses and big sinuses, which likely helped condition freezing air before it reached the lungs. Brains that were, on average, slightly larger than ours. Shaped differently, not smaller. They controlled fire. They made tools that required planning many steps ahead. They made glue from birch bark, which needs sustained heating with very little oxygen. That is not napping a rock. That is chemistry. They made cord. They used pigment. They collected eagle talons and shells, which do no practical work whatsoever. There are also claims of Neanderthal cave painting in Spain, dated to around 64,000 years, which would place it well before we arrived. That one is contested and the dating is argued over, so hold it loosely rather than dropping it. They cared for their injured. Skeletons show people who survived serious trauma and then lived for years, which does not happen without somebody helping them. And there is reasonable evidence they buried at least some of their dead. One line you will hear repeated is that their injury patterns resemble modern rodeo riders, from hunting big animals at close range. That comparison comes from a study in the 1990s, and later work has questioned how well it holds. The close-range hunting is well supported. The rodeo comparison, hold loosely. So these were not failed humans. They were a capable, cold-adapted people who lasted several times longer than our own species has managed so far. And then, around 45,000 years ago, we arrive. For a few thousand years, two kinds of human are in Europe at once. The same valleys, the same animals, the same winters. And here is the finding that rewrote everything. They did not just meet each other. They had children. If your ancestry is from outside Africa, you carry roughly 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. Recent genome work places the main period of mixing at around 47,000 years ago. Some individuals sat much closer to it. A jaw from a Romanian cave, about 40,000 years old, came from a man with so much Neanderthal ancestry that he had a Neanderthal ancestor only a handful of generations back. So what happened to them was not a simple replacement. But their numbers were clearly in trouble before we ever showed up. Their genomes show strikingly low diversity. At some sites, the DNA points to close relatives having children generation after generation. That is the signature of small, scattered, isolated bands. Now at climate. The last ice age was not steadily cold. It lurched, warm to cold and back again, sometimes inside a single lifetime. Forest became tundra. Herds moved or died. A large, well-connected population can absorb that. A string of tiny isolated ones cannot. By around 40,000 years ago, they are gone from the record. Not massacred, not beaten in one clean contest. Squeezed from several directions at once, until there were not enough of them left to carry on. If you have made it this far, it would genuinely help if you liked this video, subscribed, and sent it to one person who would find it strange. It is a small thing for you and a large thing for a channel this size. Now, back to the video. Now the strangest one, because we found them backwards. In a cave in the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia, a fragment of a child's finger bone was recovered. Small enough to sit in your palm. Nobody expected much from it. But when the DNA came back, it matched nothing. Not modern human. Not Neanderthal. An entire branch of humanity nobody had suspected, identified from genetics before anyone had a face to attach to it. They were named Denisovans, after the cave. And for years afterwards, the physical evidence stayed almost comically thin. A few teeth, a toe bone, that was close to all of it. Then a jawbone from the Tibetan Plateau, which had sat in a monastery collection for decades, turned out to be Denisovan. It was identified from proteins in the bone rather than from DNA. Then a tooth from a cave in Laos, thousands of kilometers to the south. Then something genuinely clever. Researchers started pulling human DNA straight out of cave sediment. No bones required. You can now show that Denisovans occupied a layer of dirt without ever finding a body in it. And then there is one individual, from that same Siberian cave, whose genome showed a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father. A first-generation mix of two different kinds of human. One bone fragment, one person, and proof that these groups were not simply neighbors. They were families. Whatever boundaries we draw between them, they were clearly not drawing the same ones. So what do we know about them? Physically, very little. We still cannot reliably describe their faces. Genetically, an enormous amount, because they are still here. People across parts of Asia carry Denisovan DNA. In some populations in Papua New Guinea and the surrounding islands, it runs to several percent, higher than Neanderthal ancestry gets anywhere. And one of those inherited stretches is doing real work today. Many Tibetans carry a version of a gene that helps the body cope with very low oxygen. It came from Denisovans. Sit with that for a second. People are living and working at altitudes that would make most of us seriously ill, partly because of a gene inherited from a population we can barely find in the ground. When did they disappear? Honestly, we are not sure. Somewhere in the last 30 to 50,000 years, and possibly later in some places. Their range appears to have been vast. Siberia, the Tibetan Plateau, Southeast Asia. But a huge range and small numbers can go together. And thin, scattered populations are exactly the ones that vanish quietly. And the next part of this story sounds invented. In 2003, in a cave on the Indonesian island of Flores, a team digging for early modern humans found something else entirely. The skeleton of an adult human roughly 1 meter tall, with a brain about the size of a grapefruit. The immediate reaction was disbelief. Plenty of researchers argued it had to be a modern human with a growth disorder or a disease. Then more individuals came out of the same cave, and the proportions were consistent. This was not one unwell person. It was a separate species, Homo floresiensis, and the world they lived in was extraordinary. Flores had giant rats, a stork that stood taller than they did, dwarf elephants, and Komodo dragons. Islands do this. Cut a population off for long enough, and the usual rules bend. Large animals often shrink, because a small island cannot feed a big body. Small animals often grow. It happened to the elephants there. It appears to have happened to the humans there too. Nobody is certain who they came from. Stone tools on Flores go back around 1 million years, long before these small humans appear. So something reached that island very early and stayed. Their fossils run from around 100,000 to 60,000 years ago, and stone tools suggest they may have held on until roughly 50,000. And here is the uncomfortable coincidence. That is about when modern humans start arriving in the region. We cannot prove a connection. Nobody has found evidence of a conflict. But on a small island, no catastrophe is needed. A small population under any new pressure can simply run out of time. And then, in 2019, it happened again. In a cave on the island of Luzon, in the Philippines, researchers described another species, Homo luzonensis. Teeth, hand bones, and foot bones, dated to somewhere around 50 to 67,000 years ago. The finger and toe bones are curved in a way that suggests real climbing ability, which is a very ancient-looking trait to be finding that recently. Two separate islands. Two separate, small human species. Both surviving until roughly the moment we turn up in the neighborhood. Which raises a genuinely open question. How many more island humans were there that we simply have not found? And the list is still growing. In South Africa, deep inside a cave chamber, remains of a species called Homo naledi have been dated to between about 300,000 and 240,000 years ago. A small brain, roughly a third the size of ours, but a shoulder built for climbing and a foot built for walking. A combination nobody predicted. And that date matters enormously, because it means they were alive at the same time as the earliest members of our own species. In China, a skull from Harbin, hidden down a well for decades before it reached scientists, has been dated to at least 146,000 years old. Some researchers have named it Homo longi. Others suspect it may finally be a Denisovan face. In Israel, fossils from a site called Nesher Ramla describe another population that fits neatly into no existing category. And then there is the ghost. When geneticists model African populations, some analyses suggest that a few % of the ancestry in parts of West Africa comes from an archaic human population we have never found. No fossils, no name. It is a statistical shadow, inferred from patterns in living DNA, and it is genuinely contested. But it may mean there was another kind of human in Africa entirely, whose bones we have simply never dug up. So take stock of the world 50,000 years ago. Neanderthals across Europe and Western Asia. Denisovans somewhere across an enormous stretch of Asia. Homo floresiensis on Flores. Homo luzonensis on Luzon. Homo erectus possibly only just gone. And us, spreading. That is not a world with one kind of human and a few leftovers. That is a world of human variety we can barely imagine now, because we have only ever known the version with one. And within about 10,000 years, it is only us. So why us? The intuitive answer is that we were smarter. That falls apart almost immediately. Neanderthals had brains as large as ours and made glue, cord, and ornaments. Denisovans were adapted to conditions that would flatten most people. Homo erectus outlasted us by a factor of hundreds. The island species survived environments that would terrify a modern adult. If raw intelligence were the deciding factor, this would have gone differently. The most popular current explanation is not about individual brains at all. It is about connection. Modern human sites tend to show materials moving long distances. Stone, shells, ornaments, traveling much further than any one band would walk. That points to networks. Groups who knew other groups, who traded, intermarried, and passed techniques along. And a network changes the arithmetic of survival. If one band dies in a bad winter, what they knew does not die with them, because it has already traveled somewhere else. It also means numbers. More people connected means more knowledge kept, and more chances to refill an emptied landscape. I want to be careful here, because this is a hypothesis and not a finding. Neanderthals also moved materials, sometimes a long way. The difference looks like one of degree rather than kind, and researchers argue about how large that difference really was. And even at its strongest, it only explains part of it. There is climate, which hit small isolated populations hardest. There is geography, and who happened to be cornered on an island. There is disease, which we can barely see in this record at all. And there is luck, which we hate as an explanation, and which is probably doing a great deal of the work. We came close ourselves. Our species carries surprisingly little genetic diversity for our numbers, which is what you find after a population has been through severe bottlenecks. There were moments when the entire ancestry of every living human ran through a very small number of people. We are not the winners of a contest. We are the survivors of a filter that almost every other branch failed. And here is the part one find hardest to let go of. They are not entirely gone. If your family comes from outside Africa, roughly 1 to 2% of your genome is Neanderthal. It is not decorative. Some of those stretches affect immune response, skin, metabolism, the way your body handles infection. If your ancestry is from parts of Asia or Oceania, you may carry Denisovan DNA as well. And on the Tibetan Plateau, it is helping people breathe thin air right now. Those peoples ended as separate populations. Their bodies stopped appearing in the ground. But pieces of them were absorbed rather than erased. And those pieces are still being carried forward in living bodies today. So when I say we are the only human species left, that is true. It is also slightly too tidy. We are the last branch still growing. We are also a composite built partly out of the branches that stopped. For 2 million years, there was more than one way to be human. Now there is one. And the strangest thing is not that it happened, but how recently it happened and how nearly it went the other way. We were not the inevitable ending. We were just the ones still standing when the music stopped.